Hey guys, welcome back to the show. I'm Parker Emerald, and this is The Conversation Station. Today's guest is a financial advisor, author, and educator who helps people achieve their financial and personal goals. He has a wealth of experience in the industry, having worked with clients from different backgrounds and needs. He's the author of The Truth About Taxes, a book that reveals the secrets of the tax system and how to use it to your advantage. He is also the founder of the Purpose-Driven Blueprint, a program that helps people find their purpose, fund their purpose, and change the world. So without further ado, let's give a warm welcome to the one and only Sean Briscombe. Welcome on, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Parker.
Man, you are now officially the most frequent guest in the show's history.
Ah, you're kidding. I love it.
Yeah. So the most I've had one other person on twice, and you just beat him out. Third time's the charm.
That's
Man,
awesome.
It's fun. But it is interesting.
Why do you think that is?
Because we always, I don't know. I think it's a hybrid of like you're always willing, and it's always just like, oh, I'll just reach out to Sean. But it's also like we always have such a great conversation. But it's also I think that there is a part of it of the ease of scheduling. But I also know that no matter what we're gonna do, it's gonna be a great episode, and it doesn't matter what we talk about. And so it has been. I think. But I think
So
at the end of the day,
we were just talking about this, right? We were talking about blocking people from helping you. Do you think there's any of that going on?
Not really when it comes to you and I, because for me, I'm like,
guests? Are there other guests you're afraid to call?
Oh, 100%, 100%.
Like who? Do you have name names?
Okay, well, so the interesting thing is that the most followed guest is the one that I wasn't afraid to reach out to, which was Nick Kumalatzos, just because of the conversation me and Nick had was just so cool. And the interesting thing is it felt so much more like a coaching call than a podcast, so it felt more personal.
Oh,
but
cool.
I think at the end of the day, it's some of the higher level guests who I didn't know beforehand, who I just reached out to, like Travis Chappelle, who I had on. I'm trying to think. Jordan Rogers. A lot of these different. I'm trying to think. There are a bunch of guys. I need to. One of them I know who will be happy, and I just haven't gotten around to reaching out to him. There's one that I'm not scared to reach out to him, but I have just been like going so fast that I'm like, oh, I got to schedule him. I got to get that one. Got to get that one out there.
Yeah. Hey, but you just hit on something that was kind of interesting that I don't want to just skip over it. When Nick was on your podcast, you said it felt more like a coaching sesh. Yeah. What if you invited guests on and asked them to coach you through certain, specific things that you were having challenges with, but that's where they excel, like that's their thing. And you made it a coaching sesh for people to listen to. I find like I'm feeling like that's a ton of value for other people to just be like the fly on the wall and listen to that. That's probably why Nick's podcast is so, consumed so heavily. People are just like, oh my gosh, get to be a fly on the wall, Yeah,
and I think
thinking about it.
I think it's interesting because I do see there tends to be a bit of a difference between when you are just on a call talking to someone, not recording it and putting it out, versus a podcast. And it's something where I do try with my guests to try to get it as authentic as possible. But the times when it's hardest is when I've never talked to the guest before, right?
Yeah.
Or when I've only talked to the guest for 15 minutes before, because I don't have that idea.
The relationship.
And like I think the biggest thing that made doing the episodes with you so awesome is that I've met you in person, right? And it was brief at the Apogee event, but still, there's still a connection there that you can't get virtually. But I think it's an interesting idea, and it's something that, you do need to overcome it's something I've been trying to do with the podcast the entire time, is overcome the barrier that is the guest-host relationship.
Mm-hmm. And so what's the key to doing that? How do you overcome that barrier?
I'm still figuring it out.
I think it's relationship. I think you nailed it. You focus on the relationship, and then there's that connection, and then it's easy to ask them to come on the podcast, and conversations are better, they're deeper.
Yeah. And I think the real thing though is that when people know something's going out publicly, they tend to hold back just a little bit. And it's something I was touching on in the last solo episode I did, where I was talking about how one of the main struggles with social media is that because if we are our full selves, we have no barrier, and then we get picked apart in the comments.
Yeah.
At some level, it is hard not to be hurt by that, because you're like, I'm just being me,
Sure.
you know? I'm just being who I am. And so I think that there is something where everyone just kind of does that. They kind of put up a shield, or they're even afraid of the people that they know judging them for something they'll say.
Yeah, friends and family.
And so I do think it's a hard thing to overcome, and it's something I'm struggling with. My biggest thing, though, is that when I'm somewhere where I have to record quietly, I can't be myself.
Sure.
It's so weird because I'm
like
a loud person.
Back?
I'm holding back, and so it is.
Yeah.
So I'm like, and it actually interrupts my train of thought. Now, and I think that's an interesting thing. Like right now, I'm just keeping a medium, inside voice because I'm in a public place, But I think there's a difference between that and when, last night I had to be kind of quiet because it was like 10 p.m. when I was recording my episode, and everyone else was asleep in the house, and I'm like, well, I got to record, but I can't wake everyone up. And so, but it affects my train of thought majorly. Mm-hmm. But it's also something where when half the time I'm in a conversation with people will be like, whoa, stop yelling. I'm like, I'm not yelling, I'm just talking. But it is interesting, and so one of the things that I do for those episodes, because I do truly want to detach from the feel of a podcast, is I take my microphone off of the stand and I just hold it. Because there is something more authentic about holding it, at least for me, internally. And it's an interesting thing to navigate. It's something I'm trying to navigate, and it's like, how do you be your authentic self while maintaining, I don't know, some level of disconnection from the feedback you're going to get online?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know. There's a lot going on there in that statement, I think that just the act of holding a microphone and putting it away from your mouth and then towards your mouth as you speak, and then disengaging and then engaging again, it gives you more of an opportunity to hear what the other person's saying, So yeah,
I will also tell you the reason I hold it, right? And I'm going to pick it up right now as I do this. But holding the stand kind of sucks because you still have that level of disconnection. But when I hold the microphone, it's so that I can just pull the microphone closer when I want to emphasize a point and what I'll do. And also the fact is, right now, if I want to lean towards the camera to get closer, you won't be able to hear me. If I'm talking and I start to lean forward, you can barely hear me. But when I'm holding the mic, I can lean forward and emphasize the points that are really important to me.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think, yes, that's exactly what I do, is I'm like, I want to pull you in. I want to pull myself in for these points.
So
because it's one of those points where, where even in a conversation, right? If we were face to face right now, when you want to emphasize something to someone, you tend to just lean slightly forward. You lean in. Sometimes you scare the person you're leaning in towards. Yeah, exactly. And so it's one of those things that I think it's interesting to be like, you do want to lean in, and you can't do that when you have a big old honky stand. But when I'm doing an episode like this, where it's an hour versus my 15-minute episodes of holding the mic, there's no way I'm holding this 2-3 pound mic for an hour. It's not that heavy, but
1950s microphones that are kind of flat and you talk into the surface more instead of it being directional.
Yeah,
you should get one of those old ones with the circle around it.
So the real difference is a condenser versus a dynamic microphone. And I could get one of those easily. I have one of those. I actually have it, I think, in my backpack right here. But the reason I don't use it is because it picks up a lot more background noise. I don't know what happened there, but it's no big deal. We are good to go. But I think it's interesting. But it's something I've been, the emphasis in all of my episodes over the last 30 days, or I guess 12 days right now, but going into the 30-day challenge, it's especially the episodes where I'm just talking to people, it's knowing yourself, because maybe one person feels far more authentic when they're not holding a microphone, when they're hands off.
Yeah.
But I know me. I know that I need to be hands on with the microphone to feel like I'm being myself.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things.
Talkers.
Yeah.
You got to do that stuff.
I am a hand talker.
Oh, you are?
I am totally a hand talker. But you use your hands to emphasize points, and so when I have the microphone in my hand, I can use it to emphasize a point.
That's true.
And so I think the interesting thing for me is that one of the issues we see in like social media and coaching and self-help books today is the books that are going to do well are the books, and the content that's going to do well are the blatant statements. Don't do this, it's bad. Do this, it's good. But that's not true. The truth is that it's a very nuanced thing where from person to person it can vary majorly. Obviously there are things you should stick by, like probably don't do hard drugs. That's probably not a very good idea.
But if your arm's getting cut off, you probably need morphine, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's nuance to these things.
Nuanced deal. Yeah, so there's a thing in financial planning and in wealth management that we always say it depends, which clients hate that response, you know? They're like, hey, should I do this or should I do this? Well, it depends. Depends on a million different things, right? And I think that's true for most. It's
very weird, right? Because it's one of those things where I'm like it's hard because as someone who understands content and what I need to do to get something to go viral, but also understands that that's not how the world works. I'm like, what do I do? Do I get the views or do I get the truth? You know?
Sure.
And so that's an interesting thing to navigate, especially in the very disingenuous world that we live in, and where it can be disingenuous, and it's also hard to appear authentic even when you are sometimes, because a lot of people just have discomfort on camera. Mm-hmm. And that's a hard thing to navigate, but I think it's all very interesting, and it's something that intrigues me a lot, because I'm like, for me, I've never been not comfortable on camera because I've always been the person that wants to be on camera. But the interesting thing for me to navigate is how do I be on camera and be authentic?
Yep.
You know, how do I do all of these things while still being me? And I just think it's an interesting topic to explore.
Yeah. Have you considered the possibility that being real and authentic, that skill set, is going to become more and more valuable as AI takes over all the other stuff that we used to do? Like, you're not going to have to add, subtract, learn to read, write, none of that. AI is going to do all that stuff for you. What's it not going to do? It's not going to be able to read people and discern it, what direction to go. And it's not going to be able to be authentic and real and connect with people. And so those skill sets, are going to become more and more valuable as time goes on.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing, and it's a misconception I see where people are so scared of AI, right? And I don't think that that's necessarily wrong to be scared, because AI is scary. But what people say is it's gonna do X, Y, Z. But think about the fact that when the tractor came along, it eliminated so many jobs, right? But no one would say that they want to go back to the time before the tractor. But I think AI is going to, at least in the next 20, 25 years, it's going to do more in terms of eliminating the mundane task as opposed to eliminating the creative. And that's why I would say find something where connecting with humans is important, right? And even in art, even in painting, you are creating something that's going to connect with a human. And that's what I think is important these days, because creative skills have never been more needed, right? But also, I know that like AI art is cool, but it's not real art. And either way, you still need someone to guide the AI.
Yeah, who's driving it, right?
Exactly, who's driving the tractor?
Yeah.
So you need to shift the mindset, because I think the real thing is that if you're scared of it now, right? If you're scared right now, you're going to be the person that, if you believe you're going to lose your job, you're going to be the person that loses your job. But if you look at it as exciting and you start playing with it, learning these things, that way when it comes for your job, then you can go to your boss and be like, well, you want to fire me for the AI, but I'm the person that can use the AI.
Yeah, I think that's the shift. In Apogee Schools, the school that Tim started, so they're combining everything. It's all going to be Apogee Strong now. Ages 4 to 11 is the school, and 12 to 17 is the leadership training program. It's going to be boys and girls. We've got men's group. We've got a women's group. So it's truly flipping education around throughout your entire lifespan. You know, like it's a never-ending educational journey to hit your apogee point. So in apogee schools from age 4 to 11, these kids, when they first enter the school, they're not learning how to read, how to write, how to do math. They're not learning those skill sets. They start them off learning, who am I? What do I like to do? What do I want to do? Right? What do I even want out of this journey of education? They start asking those questions at such an early age that it gets the kids to open their mind and start exploring, what am I meant to do here on earth? Right? And once they master who they are and how they're kind of like what their role is in this world, right, which is the most important thing, and they feel comfortable with themselves, then they start doing the reading, writing, arithmetic, all that, you know, stuff.
But it can be really guided based on the vision you have for yourself.
Yeah.
And that's what I find interesting, because one of the issues with the education system is it teaches kids to hate reading by making them read stuff they don't want to read.
It's the opposite. They're drilling into you. Here's 1 + 1 = 2. Here's 2 + 2 = 4. And these kids don't even know who they are or if they like math, you know?
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing is, especially with reading, it's like, okay, if you're gonna make me read Huckleberry Finn, I'm probably gonna hate reading, right? but if I tell you, hey, I want to go into XYZ field, and you find a very legit book in that's well written and engaging, I'm gonna love reading. I'm gonna love reading about that.
And you're gonna talk about what you're learning in that process. And you're going to be excited about it. So they stopped doing the badges at Apogee, because what they discovered is the kids are like, okay, well, how many badges do I need to get to do this thing? So they were focused on the result of badges, not the process of learning or enjoyment of learning. So they stripped the badges away. And now what they do is they celebrate, what are you learning right now? So at the end of every session, when they do a session, what do they call that? Where the parents walk around and look at everybody's work for the session.
Yeah.
It's literally, hey, what are you learning? Tell me what you're learning in this thing, in this session. What did you learn this session? And they've got a whole portfolio of stuff that they may be jumping around. Maybe they start off learning that they want to, I don't know, write a book. And they start writing a book and they discover that, it's not really what they want to do. They want to do this biology thing over here and learn about blood, you know? And so they spend time learning about blood. And what they're doing is activating that education muscle, where they're enjoying education and enjoying the path of learning again, you know, which is 1,000 times more important than learning the things that the AI engines are all going to take over and do for us anyway. You know?
Yeah, and I do think there is an importance to some of the base skills like reading and writing, but
Absolutely.
the fact is though is you're not going to. It's far more important to learn to enjoy those things than be perfect at them, and learn to enjoy the process of learning. Because
yes,
if I'm 12 and I'm not that great a reader, but then I'm like, I need to learn to read. Right? Okay. But I love the process of learning. Then I just get to, then it makes me feel motivated. And that's the thing. We need to teach kids how to find that infinite energy. That's what I like to call it. You know when you're on a roll and you just you don't want to stop. You just want to keep going at whatever you're doing.
Yep.
That's something that I'm still learning how to consistently achieve.
Yeah.
So and it's different for every person.
When you line up your passions with your talents and your values and your beliefs. You know, I talk about this in my book, The Truth About Taxes. There's a section where we start talking about your legacy and why we're put on earth to do what we're supposed to be doing. And so often, especially as men, as husbands, as fathers, as leaders of our families, and trying to make the money and keep the money and grow the money, it's like the last thing we're thinking about is, what do I want, right? And what am I supposed to be here doing, you know? And so we go through this exercise where you list out all of your passions, what gets you fired up in the morning. You know, when your feet hit the ground, is there something that gets you really excited? Write all those things down. What are your talents? What do you feel like your unique talents are? Like your God-given talents, things that are just uniquely you, that come very easy to you. What are your values? Write those values down. Are they family values? Are they values that your family placed on you? Or are they things you came up with that are important to you? And then beliefs. What do you believe to be true about the world around you and yourself? And when you start to mash all those things together, you can start to see and pick apart and see there's a common theme here. There's like a mission and purpose statement. There's a guiding statement or guiding sentence that I can pull out of here that will lead me and guide me for the rest of my days. Something that, I'm passionate about, I'm really good at, that's important to me, that I value dearly, and is in alignment with my beliefs about what I believe to be true, right? And so if you can figure that game out, and I encourage you to do that, man, just, get a piece of paper, make 4 quadrants, write down passions, talents, values, and beliefs, and just start taking notes. Write everything down that comes to mind. And then you start circling things, And that's what you should be doing.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because it's something we've gone away from so heavily. But that's why I really dislike this idea of college, because why do we feel the need to go to college right out of high school when we can always go back? And realistically, one of the things people will say is, but if I want to get into an Ivy League school, but the Ivy League, the interesting thing is when you look at it, the education you get from a community college versus an Ivy League school is the same, if not better, at a community college.
It's what you put into it, right? It's like anything in life. You get out what you put into it. What you invest in something.
1 second.
Sure.
Sorry about that.
Do you need to leave?
No. It was just someone who had plugged their phone in over here and they were trying to find it.
Got it.
No, but what were you saying? Sorry.
Just saying that, college and anything is what you invest in it is what you're going to get out of it. So if you're committed to investing a lot into your experience, that journey, you'll get a lot out of college. But if you're not investing in it, then...
Yeah, exactly. And I always find it funny. I'm like, okay, if I were to recommend, if there's someone who wants to go to college, right? What I would say is, if you're really set on it, do 2 years of community college before you go to some crazy school. Spend 10 grand before you go spend 100 grand on something, because you might go do 2 years of community college in X area and be like, I don't want to do this. This sucks.
Yeah.
And at least you didn't waste all your money. At least you didn't go into an exorbitant amount of debt. Yeah. And the fact is, the percentage of people, I was talking with a friend about this last night, right? I think the interesting thing is we see the stats that college-educated people make more money. But the fact is, I think it comes less down to the actual education and more so
anymore. Did you know that? That statistic's no longer true.
That statistic is no longer true?
Because here's why. Because those trade positions, plumbing, electrical, things like that, the hands-on positions, because of inflation, the cost is so high to hire those guys. They're now making more than the average college student is by a lot. Like double.
That is so interesting, yeah. But what my point was, it's less so in the education, it's more so in the fact that they were dedicated enough, right? It's far, I think, but I think
level of commitment.
Yes, it's level of commitment. And it is interesting because the people that don't tend to go to college are people that aren't as well off to begin with in the first place. And so I think it falls, and so the interesting thing is, my opinion is, whether you want to go to college or not, take 1 to 2 years and just try a bunch of things.
Yeah.
Go find all sorts of different jobs. I don't care if you take a part-time position and you do a different job every single day of the week, but try everything. And over that time, you're going to cut down on things. Be like, I don't want to do that, because you can write down, you can do that exercise, but you're not going to be able to know that that's actually the case until you test.
What if we could test those things at age 12?
Exactly.
Or 14.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that that's important. Yeah, I think that what has been done with Acton and then the Apogee schools.
Journey is all about. It's like, hey, why wait until college to test those things?
Exactly, and that is very important. I think one of the things that I try to keep in mind is like the person that's been in school for all these years and doesn't know where to go at this point, because it's you know, they're about to go into senior year or something, and they're like, okay, well, not gonna go do a completely different education, not gonna time travel or nothing back to when I was 12 and try these things. But I'm like, if you are, that's my recommendation, is to go try things whenever you get the opportunity. And the fact is, you do have opportunity when you're young. I've tried so many things. Yep. And half of the things have just been playing with ideas mentally, right?
Yeah.
And playing with the idea in my mind for so long that I get to see if I stay excited about the idea, right? And like the podcast, I started the podcast on a whim. I did 3 episodes, stopped for like 6 months, did like another episode, stopped for a little while, then did like 10, 15, 20 episods, stopped for a little while, and now I've done, 12 episodes in the last 12 days. But the interesting thing was it was just a choice. It was like, okay, well, I had learned that I liked doing the podcast, and I was like, well, what can I do to form the habit of doing the podcast? And it was 30 episodes in 30 days, because it is a difficult thing, and it has been more difficult than I expected, but I expected it to be more difficult than I expected. And that's an interesting thing to think about. But for me, I've learned, and I don't have that perfect idea of exactly what I want to do, right? Because that's a hard thing to find. But I know the people that I want to, the mentors, the people who I want to live similar lives to. And I think that is just as important, is to have those people, because when I can be like, okay, well, there's a person, there's Rodney Farrell, there's Matt Boudreau, there's Nick Koumalatsos, there's XYZ, right? And I can grab those names, and I'm like, okay, well, here's what I like that this person's doing, this person's doing, this person's doing. It, again, helps. And I think every person is on a quest to clarity, and they can't truly become the best version of themselves till they get to clarity.
Yeah. That's that alter ego effect, Like, who would you have to become to be like as powerful as Nick Koumalatsos, It'd be a lot of work, be a lot of discipline, Who would you have to become to be a Jeff Sandiford, Be a ton of work. So, yeah. Are you willing to do the work? That's the question. And I think even before you go there, is what I'm hearing, and what's sad to me, I feel like college never gives the student the opportunity to ask the question, what do I want and why? Why does that matter to me?
They give you a list they give you a list to like check one box.
Result you want.
This is
check these boxes.
Exactly, it's
insane.
But I think it's far more important to check every single box, because you don't know what the result you desire is.
Like a doctor. Doctor's a great example. Why would a person going to med school want to become a doctor? What's the number one thing they say?
I want to help people?
Yeah, I want to help people, right? And then they get into a hospital setting, and they're told how to treat the patient, what they're allowed to prescribe, and how much. So someone else is telling them what to do. That's not helping somebody,
Yeah.
It's an insane proposition. So we need to, I think we need to just flip it all upside down on its head. Throw the table over, and say, we've done this for long enough. 100 years is long enough, beating our head against the wall, where our students aren't learning how to learn. The kids in school don't even know how to learn different subjects.
Yeah, it is an issue, and
they're not taught how to ask good questions or anything,
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've talked about this in our previous episodes. It's far more important to learn how to learn, but even more important than that, it's important to learn how to unlearn something that's no longer serving you.
Yep.
And I find it interesting, because we've had the system for so long. The one thing that looks the most similar in our society to 100 years ago is schools, and it's insane. It is insane that it is the same education. And
the subject matter has changed drastically. It's the same system and process, but they've swapped out the subject matter. Like we were a lot smarter 100 years ago. Kids learned civics 100 years ago. They understood government, you know?
Yeah, and it's interesting, though, that even back then, the fact is that the education system was created to serve the Industrial Revolution and create employees for... That's what it was created for. Mm-hmm. And so I just find it so interesting. And I think the fact that we don't understand the government as much as we used to is insane. Mm-hmm. Because it's crazy to live in a country where you don't understand how it's ran. Yeah. And that we live in a country where people think that needing your ID to vote is an insane idea. You need your ID to buy alcohol. You need your ID to do all of these things. And people think that it's crazy that you need an ID to pick who the president is. Yeah. Like, that's hilarious to me. Because I'm like, what kind of people have we created in a society where they think that it is, where they think that the people, I don't know, where they think it's hard to acquire an ID? Like, realistically, if you need an ID, you can get one quickly.
It's not even about the ID. What we're doing is we're ceding our own sovereignty over to other people, this governing body that really shouldn't have anything to do with what we're doing locally, you know? Like, there's no way the federal government should be telling us what we should be doing in Austin, Texas, right? There's no way. It's like 100 years ago, that was the most foreign thought in the world. It's like you are a federal agent of some kind of agency, and you want to tell us what to do? We govern ourselves. We rule ourselves.
I think I think what we need to do is we need to take as much federal presence out of states and give the power back to the states, right? Because I think what's interesting is every state, there are states that are going to have very similar things to what the federal government believes is right. But at the end of the day, it's far more important for each state to be able, we are the United States. Therefore, we are united, we are one, but we are individual. There is an individuality to all of these places. But we saw it most in COVID that, like, these states, yes, they can pass different things, but they basically, during COVID, 90% of states just did exactly what they were told. Mm-hmm. Exactly what the federal government was saying. But it raises this question of, are we states anymore, right? In the fact of how the entire point of having these different areas is that they can be different. And obviously California versus Texas
sovereign,
is,
you know, like states are more are sovereign over the federal government. That's the way it was designed. We're no longer that way. The federal government can, come into the state and kick it around and do whatever they want. A lot of it's just funding. It's money. It's this debt. The federal debt. The federal government can print money at will and then hand it out to whoever they want to. And the power of being able to do that is absolute. And that's what's corrupted everybody.
Yeah, and it's crazy. I think it's crazy that we ever went off the gold standard. I think that's crazy. That, like, our money is literally the entire value of a dollar. It's literally just an arbitrary number. It's literally a lie. People talk about cryptocurrency being a lie, but the fact is you can't make more of any cryptocurrency, but the federal government can make more dollars at any time they want. And so it raises the question of, if people think that something that you can't make more of, where there's a finite amount, if they think that's crazy, then I would just say take a look at the dollar bill and realize that there is no value, but there is nothing behind the dollar bill. The dollar bill is literally just that piece of paper in your hand. That's all it is.
Are you familiar with modern monetary theory?
No.
So it's the idea, the concept that it doesn't matter how much we print the dollars, it doesn't matter how much debt we incur, because it's all kind of relative, It's like it doesn't matter if it's $35 trillion or $35 of debt. It's all the same. So because we can just print more money to pay for more of the debt.
But every time we pay for the debt, the value of our money goes down, so we would have to pay more for the debt to pay off the debt.
So it's just a number of zeros that you keep adding to the amount. And then every once in a while you chop the zeros off and you just keep going down the road. That's what they think is the way to do this.
It's very interesting.
It's just completely fake at that point. There's no value in the dollars. There's no value in that system.
Yeah, and it does raise a question, like, why would a government make a choice, right, to take their money and devalue it? Like, they literally when they took it off the gold standard, that means it no longer has an inherent value because there's nothing behind it. And the interesting thing is if they wanted more money to give out to people, then as a government, they would have to, back then, they would have had to acquire more of the backing of the currency.
Yeah. So we exported the cost of manufacturing to Asia to make it cheap, right?
Yeah.
And what happened was we imported inflation by doing that. It was a swap. We said, well, we'll just keep printing the money and you guys keep manufacturing all the stuff and we'll keep buying it. And
it is crazy now that there is so little actually produced in America, of the goods we consume. 90% of it is made in China.
Yeah.
90% of it is made elsewhere. And it's like, why? I know that if everything was made here, it would be more expensive. But still, well, again, we just talked about.
If we have tons of oil, for example, which we do, tons of liquid natural gas, and we just drill, and unleash it to everybody, it drives the price of the barrel down.
Yeah.
Supply and demand. If we flood the market with supply, it drives the price down. And I think that there's a way to do that. Very quickly to reverse this.
What does that look like?
It would mean that we would have to bring all manufacturing back home, or 90% of it. So there are things that obviously you can produce overseas. But.
So I guess the curiosity is, how do you do that when you have hundreds of thousands, millions of private companies that do things over in other countries? How do you do that?
We did it in 2016. We reversed the trend of importing oil, and by 2019, like going into 2020, we were a net exporter of energy, meaning we exported more oil and gas than we brought in. For the first time in about, 30 years, 40 years?
Very interesting. But it is so interesting because I feel like during that time, all that was being said was that becoming a net exporter was bad. That's what was being said, at least on the media side of things. But I think the interesting thing is we talk about the environmental impacts of these things, but the people complaining about that only seem to care when it's here, and then they're like, oh, but if you stop getting the oil here and you let the people in other places do it, we don't care. It doesn't matter. But
the technology is so far advanced that we don't have the environmental impact that we had 100 years ago. It's not the same thing at all. There's horizontal drilling now. So you can pierce the ground in one location, just one location, and have 1,000 drills going out in all directions and tap just as much oil.
How interesting.
With one location,
Yeah.
Stuff like that. So you don't have to poke a bunch of holes in the ground and set up a bunch of sites anymore. That's like a big fallacy. But, environmental lobbies and environmentalists are quacks. They're idiots. They don't,
Yeah, it's so
part
interesting.
of the modern monetary theory group.
My curiosity.
We should put in as much money as we can to ship it around, give it to people.
Yeah, my curiosity is like, it is interesting how with the environmental activists, they all just kind of seem to pop up from nowhere. Mm-hmm. Like the Greta Thunberg. Like, where did she come from? Like, where did she come from? She was just there one day, right?
What's a more important question is, why are we listening to her? What does that say about the adults in the room? We're listening to a kid. Yeah,
it's interesting.
That's when you got to question things. It's like, all right, If you're an adult listening to a kid, you're no longer a serious person. You know.
Well, Sean, you just listened to me.
I don't consider you a kid, though. You're more adult than any other kid your age.
Fair enough.
All of you guys are.
Yeah.
So there's maturity in it.
But I do think it's interesting. So I just finished. For like 3 months, I was producing a music video at one of my internships, and it was a song that was about the environment that featured a lot of quotes from Greta Thunberg. And I spent 3 months on that music video. It was not. I enjoyed the production side of things, but I got so tired of that song, and I didn't like the song to start. It's not. It's a good song musically, but it was just so doomsday. That's one of the things I find interesting, is it feels like a lot of the climate movement, they just yell about everything. They cry wolf on a lot of things because they're like, oh, X is going to happen by this year. And then it doesn't happen. And they're like, well, that's not going to happen, but this is going to happen. And then, wait for it, it doesn't happen. It's like, what are you talking about here?
It's no different than somebody that throws out an ultimatum. If you don't do this, then I'm going to leave you. You know? Whoop.
Yeah.
Did we lose you?
Nope. Hello?
Your camera's not on.
Hello?
You there?
Yes. What? Hold on. What? Can you not hear me?
No, I can't see you.
Oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
I don't know, but it should be fine. It seems like there's a major delay now, though. I don't know what the issue is, because I have great Wi-Fi over here, but I have my camera going, so either way I can just fix it in post.
Cool. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, it is interesting, and it's been an interesting experience, something I've been navigating. How do we navigate, doing work we enjoy for something that it doesn't align with our values when we are the employee? And that's why I think it's important to be an entrepreneur. That's why I think I remember seeing in your Truth About Taxes documentary, which is really great. When you were talking about, I don't remember what the exact numbers were, but the employees versus employers, those numbers have completely flipped. What were those stats? It was like something in the 90% of people owned their own business.
So it's this weird statistical anomaly called the Rule of 97. And it just says that in 1897, 97% of all of all working people worked for the 3% of society, the top 3%. Wait, no, sorry, the opposite. 97% of Americans were self-employed. They created their own income. They were entrepreneurs. They were employees. Or they were investors. They were shopkeepers, farmers. They created their own wealth and income. 3% of the society worked for the 97% as apprentices, and then 100 years later, in 1997, those numbers flip-flopped, and only 3% of people owned their own business. 97% of us went to work for corporations. And so during that 100-year demographic shift, what happened was, as people left the farms, left the shops, closed their businesses, and went to work in the factories or went to work for companies, the government saw that, and everybody naturally fell into the 1040 tax world, right, where they were now an employee getting W-2 income. And so the government saw that, and they were like, ooh, we can take advantage of that. It was this huge demographic shift. And they said, we need to retool the code so we can extract more tax from these people that are W-2 wage earners, that are working for corporations. Because if you work for yourself, you have all kinds of deductions, right?
Yeah.
The cost of goods, the
all these things, yeah.
Systems, sales, everything.
Yeah,
is a deduction.
It's so interesting, and I think the most important part of that is it is majorly important to work for yourself, not just because of tax benefits, but because of the fact that because when you work for someone else, you are reliant on them. You are reliant on this huge chain of command, and you learn that you just go to work and you do these things, and then you get your money. But let's say that something happens and you can't do that anymore, and now you're stuck. You're like, what do I even do? But when you work for yourself, it also creates, because you learn how to make money by yourself, you usually end up doing a heck of a lot less and making a heck of a lot more. Now, there is the grind of getting to that point, but once you get there, it is very easy to spend time with the people you love, do what you want to do, and still bring in enough wealth to both live an amazing life for yourself and set up an amazing life for your kids.
Yeah, you have one thing is different from people that work for others, work for corporations. Those are intrapreneurs. I call them intrapreneurs. They're working inside of a structure, inside of a corporation. Their job is to figure out, how do I level up my game inside of this company so I can bring in more money, right? Which is the same kind of process that the entrepreneur has. Entrepreneur works for himself, creates his own business and his own income, but the name of the game is, how do I increase that number? How do I level up my game and bring home more money?
Yeah, and so go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so they're both pretty similar. The one key difference, though, is that the entrepreneur has leverage versus the intrapreneur that doesn't really have leverage. And leverage is a key component in wealth building.
For sure, and I think it's interesting to think about, because when you are in a business and you level up your game so you can bring in more money, right? But the reason that you get paid more money is because you are helping that business bring in more money. And so what I find interesting is, what if, as opposed to getting paid when you bring money into them, why don't you take your skill set and bring money, that same money, and you could be doing the exact same thing. But if you do it independently, or even if you're someone doing office work and you do office work as an independent office work agency, you are going to bring in more money because your chain of command doesn't get paid before you, because you are the top of the chain of command. So when you bring in more money, you directly bring it in.
Though.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're also adding a lot more value when you take on that responsibility and ownership. And money is just a exchange of value. That's all it is. If the more value you add to other people's lives, the more dollars you get in the door. So if you're unhappy with your level of money in the bank, if you look at your bank account and you're not happy, that just means you need to add more value to people's lives. You got to figure out, how can I add more value?
Yeah.
And once you do that, your bank account will change.
Exactly. And I think one of the interesting things for me to look at is, once you are an entrepreneur and in that leadership role, one of the most important things, though, is when you are an entrepreneur, you are usually, after you get to a certain point, you're going to have a team, because that is an important thing to do so that you aren't, flying solo. But when you have that team, it's very important to create less of an employer-employee relationship and more of a collaborative relationship. And that's something I've seen, because I've worked in multiple environments, one where it's very employee-employer, but in some of the others, it's been a collaboration. And the fact is, your employees will give you so much more when you are collaborating with them, when it is a free-flowing conversation. It's not I have to write a memo to the CEO. It's, I'm going to go hang out with the CEO, and we're just going to talk about some ideas and, workshop some things and just have fun with it. I think that's the thing. You have to create an environment where people are excited. But I also think that comes from, you can't let the corporate mindset come into your business in a lot of ways.
Yep. You've got to make sure that people are bought into the mission and purpose of what you're doing, like who you're serving and what your mission is with that business. When they're bought into it, they'll bend over backwards, like you said. Just make them feel part of the mission.
For sure. Yeah.
People will run through walls for you. But.
Yeah, man. So as we kind of bring things to a close here, I have a question now that I ask every single guest, and it's to the person listening. What is the 1 to 2? What is the important thing that they should take with them going forward into the rest of their lives?
This is important. I've been hearing this a lot from the younger generation that's just getting into making money and trying to build businesses. And this is a pattern that I'm seeing, that hopefully we can stop and change direction and pivot and get back on track, is that people are chasing the dollar more and more these days. And it's because they're anxious about what's going on in the world. things are getting more expensive. Money's not lasting as long as it did, and people are panicking and they're chasing dollars. Okay? It's not working for a lot of people. Most people are not bringing home what they want to bring home. They're not increasing their income or building more revenue. They're just working harder, chasing more dollars. The key to success is to stop focusing on the dollars and start focusing on serving other people. And if you can make that shift in your mind from a business of creating revenue and income and money to a business that serves at the highest possible level, the money will come. But the formula is never what we think it is. It's never go to business school, get your master's degree, go work for a giant company and make a bunch of money. That is not success. You'll always be limited. You'll always be unsatisfied. You'll always be unhappy. But if you focus on how am I going to serve other people? What am I going to do to make a bigger impact in the world? You'll make all the money that you can handle.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. And it's something I hear all the time as well.
We have to shift our mindset. We have to shift our mindset.
Exactly.
We're getting stuck in this weird pattern of, flipping through Instagram, seeing these people on yachts with spending money everywhere, thinking that that's real.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. And so one of the interesting things one of the analogies I hear is you can't expect something to grow if you don't plant the seed, right? And so if you just provide value to as much people as you can right now, even before you're getting paid, right, there is going to be, you do obviously need to bring income in, but if you just serve people, it might be a week, it might be a month, it might be a year, it might be a decade, but the seeds you plant will come back to serve you one day. So you need to plant as many of them as possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on here, Sean. We got to do this one. I guess we got to do it again. Make you.
Yeah, we do.
4. And we should pick a time when, because on these days, I have to be out of here by like 2:30. So I have to pack up. We got to pick a time when we just have some time to just kind of go and just let it take it as it comes and just have fun with it. Because I like those episodes where it's not as like a time crunch, because it can feel like that. Mm-hmm. But again, thank you so much for coming on here. Thank you. Of course. Thank you guys.
Thanks for having me. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Thank you guys at home for watching. I'm Parker Emerald. I've been talking to Sean Briscombe, and this has been The Conversation Station.